All right, everybody. So welcome back. Everybody hear me okay online? Do I got the mic turned on right? All right. So welcome back on this very cold day. You guys who are online, be glad you're not in this room that we're in right now because it's cold. It's very cold. They never had the heat on right or before there. So today, what we are doing is we're talking about the philosophy of ethics called utilitarians. Oops, turn my camera off. Not that camera. There we go. The utilitarian philosophers, and this was to give you guys a little bit of context for this. I will put some notes up here. I'm going to show you another one of those crash course videos to kind of get us warmed up to it. This is a very influential idea within ethics, utilitarianism. So this term came about in the 19th century. So we're starting to move. During Wednesday's class, I'm going to advance backwards, back to the 1700s a little bit. But utilitarianism is mostly a philosophy that developed in the 1800s, and it's still something that's widely practiced today as far as being like an ethical framework. Especially next week when we start talking about medical ethics, like how do we look at certain things, especially from that perspective. Utilitarianism is widely popular philosophy there too. It's basically the idea that greatest good, the greatest number. Whenever we think of interesting like ethical dilemmas or ethical choices, the idea of utilitarianism is it should be the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's how we should always kind of try to base our decisions on things that we do. The greatest good for the greatest number of people. Some of the philosophers who innovated this, Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill. I don't know if we have any education majors in the room or not, but John Stuart Mill was famous as well for his contributions to education. But basically, how do we define this question of the greatest good, you might ask? Bentham said, pretty much had the thesis, all human beings desire pleasure. Sounds like Epicureanism again, right? All human beings desire pleasure. So what he kind of constitutes is how can we weigh pleasure? How can we measure pleasures? So I'm going to show you this video to kind of get us warmed up some more to this idea before I start complicating it further. Let me go ahead and share my screen and I'll show that.
Should Batman kill the Joker? If you were to ask the Dark Knight himself with his hard and fast no killing rule, he'd say absolutely not. Actually, in fact, he would say,
Absolutely not.
When you think about it, dude is pretty Kantian in his ethics. Regardless of what Joker does, there are some lines that good people do not cross. And for Batman, killing definitely falls on the wrong side of that line. But let's be real here. Joker is never gonna stop killing. Sure, Batman will have him thrown back in Arkham, but we all know that he's gonna get out. He always gets out, and once he's free, he will kill again, and maim, and terrorize. And when he does, won't a little bit of that be Batman's fault? Batman has been in a position to kill the Joker hundreds of times. He has had the power to save anyone from ever being a victim of the Joker again. If you have the ability to stop a killer and you don't, are you morally pure because you didn't kill? Or are you morally dirty because you refused to do what needs to be done? So, why do I describe Batman as Kantian? Well, the school of thought laid out by 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, now known as Kantianism, is pretty straightforward. More precisely, it's absolute. Kantianism is all about sticking to the moral rule book. There are never any exceptions or any excuses for violating moral rules. And our man Batman tries his hardest to stick to his code, no matter what. But there are other ways of looking at ethics. Like, instead of focusing on the intent behind our behavior, what if we paid more attention to the consequences? One moral theory that does this is utilitarianism. It focuses on the results or consequences of our actions and treats intentions as irrelevant. Good consequences equal good actions in this view. So what's a good consequence? Modern utilitarianism was founded in the 18th century by British philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, but the theory has philosophical ancestors in ancient Greek thinkers such as Epicurus. All of these guys agreed that actions should be measured in terms of the happiness or pleasure that they produce. After all, they argued happiness is our final end. It's what we do everything else for. Think about it like this. Many things that you do for the sake of something else. You study to get a good grade, you work to get money. But why do you want good grades or money? There are different answers we could give, like maybe we're seeking affirmation for our intelligence or the approval of our parents or a degree that will give us a career that we want. But why do we want that particular career? Why do we want approval? We can keep asking these questions, but ultimately our answer will bottom out in, I want what I want because I think it will make me happy. That's what we all want. It's one of the few things everyone has in common. And utilitarians believe that's what should drive our morality. Like Kant, utilitarians agree that a moral theory should apply equally to everyone, but they thought the way to do that was to ground it in something that's really intuitive. And there's really nothing more basic than the primal desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So it's often said that utilitarianism is a hedonistic moral theory. This means the good is equal to the pleasant, and we ought morally to pursue pleasure and happiness and work to avoid pain. But utilitarianism is not what you'd call an egoistic theory. Egoism says that everyone ought morally to pursue their own good. In contrast to that, utilitarianism is other-regarding. It says that we should pursue pleasure or happiness not just for ourselves, but for as many sentient beings as possible. To put it formally, we should act always so as to produce the greatest good for the greatest number. This is known as the principle of utility. Okay, so no one's gonna argue with a philosophy that tells them to seek pleasure. But sometimes doing what provides the most pleasure to the most people can mean that you have to take one for the team. It can mean sacrificing your pleasure in order to produce more good overall. Like when it's your birthday and your family says you can choose any restaurant you want. The thing that would make you happiest is Thai food, but you know that that would make the rest of your family miserable. So when you choose Chinese, which is nobody's favorite but everybody can make do, then you've thought like a utilitarian. You've chosen the action that would produce the most overall happiness for the group, even though it produced less happiness for you than other alternatives would have. The problem is, for the most part, we're all our own biggest fans. We each come preloaded with a bias in favor of our own interests. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Caring about yourself is a good way to promote survival. But where morality is concerned, utilitarians argue, as special as you are no more special than anybody else. So your interests count, but no more than anyone else's. Now, you might say you agree with that. I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as being generous and selfless. But even though I'm sure you are a totally nice person, you have to admit that things seem way more important. weightier, higher stakes when they apply to you rather than to some stranger. So utilitarians suggest that we make our moral decisions from the position of a benevolent, disinterested spectator. Rather than thinking about what I should do, they suggest that I consider what I would think if I were advising a group of strangers about what they should do. That way, I have a disposition of goodwill, but I'm not emotionally invested, and I'm a spectator rather than a participant. This approach is far more likely to yield a fair and unbiased judgment about what's really best for the group. Now, to see utilitarianism put to the test, let's pop over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy.
Spotlight shine bright all on me. Got the internet talking like, who is she?
20th century British philosopher Bernard Williams offered this thought experiment. Jim is on a botanical expedition in South America when he happens upon a group of 20 indigenous people and a group of soldiers. The whole group of indigenous people is about to be executed for protesting their oppressive regime. For some reason, the leader of the soldiers offers Jim the chance to shoot one of the prisoners since he's a guest in their land. He says that if Jim shoots one of the prisoners, he'll let the other 19 go. But if Jim refuses, then the soldiers will shoot all 20 protesters. What should Jim do? More importantly, what would you do? Williams actually presents this case as a critique of utilitarianism. The theory clearly demands that Jim shoot one man so that 19 will be saved, but Williams argues no moral theory ought to demand the taking of an innocent life. Thinking like a Kantian, Williams argues that it's not Jim's fault that the head soldier is a total dirtbag, and Jim shouldn't have to get literal blood on his hands to try and rectify the situation. So although it sounds pretty simple, utilitarianism is a really demanding moral theory. It says we live in a world where sometimes people do terrible things, and if we're the ones who happen to be there and we can do something to make things better, we must, even if that means getting our hands dirty. And if I sit by and watch something bad happen when I could have prevented it, my hands are dirty anyway. So Jim shouldn't think about it as killing one man. That man was dead already because they were all about to be killed. Instead, Jim should think of his decision as doing what it takes to save 19. And Batman needs to kill the Joker already. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, if you decide you want to follow utilitarian moral theory, you have options. Specifically, two of them. When Bentham and Mill first proposed their moral theory, it was in a form now known as act utilitarianism, sometimes called classical utilitarianism. And it says that in any given situation, you should choose the action that produces the greatest good for the greatest number, period. But sometimes the act that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number can seem just wrong. For instance, suppose a surgeon has 5 patients all waiting for transplants. One needs a heart, another a lung, 2 are waiting for kidneys, and the last needs a liver. The doctor is pretty sure that these patients will all die before their names come up on the transplant list, and he just so happens to have a neighbor who has no family, total recluse, not even a very nice guy. The doctor knows that no one would miss the guy if he were to disappear, and by some miracle, the neighbor is a match for all 5 of the transplant patients. So it seems like, even though this would be a bad day for the neighbor, an act utilitarian should kill the neighbor and give his organs to the 5 patients. It's the greatest good for the greatest number. Yes, 1 innocent person dies, but 5 innocent people are saved. This might seem harsh, but remember that pain is pain regardless of who's experiencing it. So the death of the neighbor would be no worse than the death of any of those patients dying on the transplant list. In fact, it's 5 times less bad than all 5 of their deaths. So thought experiments like this one led some utilitarians to come up with another framework for their theory. This one is called rule utilitarianism. This version of the theory says that we ought to live by rules that, in general, are likely to lead to the greatest good for the greatest number. So yes, there are going to be situations where killing an innocent person will lead to the greatest good for the greatest number. But rule utilitarians want us to think long-term and on a larger scale. And overall, a whole society where innocent people are taken off the streets to be harvested for their organs is gonna have a lot less utility than one where you don't have to live in constant fear of that happening to you. So rule utilitarianism allows us to refrain from acts that might maximize utility in the short run, and instead follow rules that will maximize utility for the majority of the time. As an owner of human organs, this approach might make sense to you. But I still gotta say, if Batman were a utilitarian of either kind, it wouldn't look very good for the Joker. Today we learned about utilitarianism. We studied the principle of
Yeah, he explained that pretty well, I think. The greatest good for the greatest number of people, no matter what. And it's all because we, as human beings, desire pleasure. Like, what is the greatest good? Seeking the pleasure. But it's not, as again, like he said, it's not always pleasure for yourself. That's what Epicureanism is, right? Seeking pleasure for yourself. Rather, you should seek the overall pleasure of the greatest number of people, even if that goes against yourself. Bentham had a Bentham pretty much said you can measure this stuff. This isn't just a subjective thing. Bentham came up with the idea you can measure this stuff yourself. Let's see here. So let me type some notes. Okay, still sharing. So he actually came up with a he called it the utility calculus. So how can we measure an act? I will make the font smaller here in a second. So I think that this kind of goes in descending order of importance. That font a little smaller. Maybe get it on one page. There we go. So the question is, this is something again. This is something that's not subjective. This is something quantitative that we can measure. How long is the pleasure? So how long does that pleasure last? How sure is the pleasure? How soon will the pleasure be experienced? How many more pleasures will follow? Like imagine we're using like doing drugs as an example here, right? Like if you don't have much more in your stash, right? You're probably gonna the fecundity aspect is probably part of that. How free from pain is the pleasure? Will the pleasure cause pain? And then how many people will experience this pleasure? This is something that Bentham said that we can measure um, quantitatively. Like we can put like a numerical value on certain things and then kind of even come up with a number for whether or not the action seems just or not for the greatest number of people. Mill, on the other hand, didn't think that it was something quantitative, like to this extent. He thought that there was a lot more gray. As the video just said, Bentham was a lot more exact. Mill kind of used the Hume trick of saying we ought to do it instead of we should do it. We ought to do it. So to kind of give you guys some thought experiment examples here, this is the classic thought experiment to talk about utilitarianism. It's called the trolley problem. So it says a runaway trolley is about to hit 5 people tied to a track. You can pull a lever to divert it to another track where it will kill 1 person. So here you are. You're running the tracks. The trolley gets away. You only have time to stop it. So should you stop? Should you kill if you're in that decision right at the heat of the moment? Should you kill the 5 people? Should you kill one person? How would you? Utilitarians would argue you should kill the one person, right, instead of the 5 people. Do you guys agree with that? Does that seem like a too cold of a way of looking at it? Do you feel like there's some logic to it?
I think just like I think that you theoretically would kill one person, but of course then there are those follow-up questions of, well, what if that one person is a doctor who saves millions, and who are you to play God? I think I would just argue that kind of the only wrong decision is no decision at all most of the time when you're faced with choices like that.
You told me earlier that you're not much of a fan of Kant. Do you think Kant wouldn't pull the lever at all?
No, because that would be making a decision. And that's why I don't like Kant, because he never wants to make a choice.
Yeah, murder is wrong no matter what. So he wouldn't pull the lever regardless. And yeah, like that. What if you have 5 people, right? Maybe that one. Well, maybe you could reverse it too. Like, what if that one person is in the 5? Like, what if that person is going to cure cancers in the group of 5? Well, you still save the, or yeah. What if that? I had that wrong. What if the person is curing cancers and not one? Right, like you just said, Jackie. Um, well, you saved 5 people. You killed that one person who's going to make such a contribution to the world. So if you kind of look at it from that respect, you can kind of see some of the problems inherent within. Um, you want to go ahead, Makai? Unmute. Tell us what you think.
Oh, I was basically just saying I agree with what you said about who are we to basically choose one person out of the 5. And they could have just as much as an impact as any of the other people. So I can definitely agree with that.
Do you agree in the sense that in this example that we should kill the one person to save 5, or do you feel like we shouldn't kill, or do you feel like you should just let the lever go and the 5 go?
I mean, I don't know. That's like, I feel like guilt would be sitting on my heart after that. Like, I couldn't just choose one person. Like, it's not my job to pick everybody's fate. Like, that would just be crazy.
Right. Yeah, I liked the example used on the slides as well, or on the video with Batman. Right? Batman, if you think about it, is a very Kantian in his ethics. He refuses to kill no matter what. Well, if he was thinking more like a utilitarian, he would probably take the Joker out. The Joker's just going to keep killing and killing and killing, or pain and suffering is going to be caused by letting the Joker live than by killing him. So go ahead, Rachel.
What would you choose, like personally? What would you choose?
Sure. Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, I'm more of a Kantian than I am a utilitarian at heart. So if I had to do it, I'm Jackie's worst nightmare here. I think if I did it, I wouldn't pull the lever at all. Right? Because who am I to choose and play God? That's probably how I would do it. So I tend to have a very Kantian way of looking at things a lot of the time, I think. What about you? What would you choose?
I don't think I could make a decision.
You're like me in that regard.
I
Yeah.
don't think I
You know? Yeah, it makes sense. We can keep adding some wrinkles to this same sort of question. Let's see. Here's a question. You guys are going to be some future medical professionals. A lot of you guys are going to be nurses or rad tech. Here's a question. A hospital has only one ventilator left. 2 patients needed. First patient, 25 years old, otherwise healthy, high chance of recovery. Second patient, 82 years old, terminal condition, low chance of survival. So if you can only keep one of those patients alive uh, with that one ventilator you got, which one would you keep alive?
Probably the one with the higher chance of survival.
So the younger one, right?
Yeah. As bad as it sounds.
I mean, I agree. I think that I would, but I don't know that I could. That's a really hard, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, what we can add even more wrinkles to that if we want. Like, what if that old man is the president of the United States? Right? Most of them are about 82 anymore. Um, so you have a 25-year-old kid with his whole life ahead of him. Then let's make the 82-year-old person the president of the United States. Would you
I mean, I guess that sucks for him.
for the 25-year-old
No, for the president.
for the president? Because you would still give it to the 25-year-old in that case.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
More life to live.
why would his life be more valuable just because he's the president? You know, like we can replace him. They have a system for that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question, Rachel. Like, why would his life?
Exactly.
So I'd like to think that if it came to that, that most hospitals would probably give it to the president over the normal 25-year-old man. I hate to be cynical, but that's probably how it would go if such a situation ever arose. Um, yeah, if you're thinking about it like a utilitarian, like you guys just said, the first patient, the younger one, has a higher, like there's more of a possibility for that patient to live a happier, long life. Kaylee was kind of thinking along those lines, right? Has a whole life ahead of him. The 82-year-old man doesn't have much of a life ahead of him. Can only save one. Better to save the younger one. That's how a utilitarian would think. I guess we Kantians would probably just sit in indecision and trying to come up with such a decision.
The only wrong decision is no decision. I'm saying.
Right. Go ahead.
I feel like I'd make the same decision even if the 82-year-old had a better chance of living. If his outcome was going to be better for that kid.
Right. So yeah, she's adding another wrinkle to it. Let's say that the 82-year-old have a high likelihood. Let's say like the 25-year-old would be in like a vegetative state, right? So let's add that wrinkle to it, right? The 25-year-old's in the vegetative state. In that situation, should you just pull the plug on the 25-year-old to keep the 82-year-old going. Um, what do y'all think of that one?
I think it should be whoever is like gonna have a chance to live their life, because
Right.
there's no point in giving it to somebody who's gonna die anyways when you could have saved someone else's life and they could have went on to live.
Well, arguably, with what you just said there, Kaylee, the 25-year-old would still live the longer life. Like they're probably on a ventilator, right? They would still have the possibility for a longer life. So are you arguing the duration of the life or the quality of the life?
More the quality,
Right.
I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. Like we said, like the video said, utilitarians are based more on the consequences of the action rather than the intent, whereas Kant's were more about the intent rather than the action. That's kind of the question we've been kind of circling around this whole class. How much should intention weigh our actions? Um, let's see. I had another good one up my sleeve. Okay, yeah. A couple of years ago, here's another medical one for you. A couple of years ago, the COVID shot. That was a big issue a couple of years ago. The jab, right? So you can think about this in terms of utilitarianism if you want. Think about it. The government was making a very utilitarian argument for why you should get the jab, right? Because if you get it, it's a greater chance for the greatest number of people that they will make it. Right? If you get the jab, arguably you wouldn't get as sick. Arguably, other people wouldn't catch it as easily from you if you have already built an immunity to it. So if you think about it, the government is making that argument, the utilitarian argument, to for the you should get it for the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The other side argued more for individual liberties. Right? So who's the government? Who's the government to tell us what to do? Um, like maybe there was some skepticism about how worthy the vaccine was. Maybe it was just a simple matter of don't tread on me, right? Don't tell us what to do. But if you think about it, the other side was making more of an individual argument, right? Focusing more on not on the greater good, but on the greater good for themselves, I guess you could say, rather than the greater good of all. I'm sure all of you guys had your opinion on that topic, but if you think about it, that's kind of what it boils down to as a utilitarian argument. Is it the greatest good for yourself and the greatest good for all? Um, all right, now throwing that wrinkle out there, what do you all think of that one? Even thinking about the decisions that you might have made a couple of years ago about whether to get the jab or not.
I mean, I chose not to get it because I feel like they don't know enough about it. And I mean, I still to this day wouldn't get it.
Right, so skepticism was a reason for why you didn't do it, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
What would you have said to that argument, Brittany, that you should do it for for the greater for the greater good of the community around you?
I would have said to kiss my butt. I mean, honestly.
That's
I
fair,
mean, my mom works in a pharmacy and she was forced to get it or she would have been fired. And I just don't think that that's fair because it's your body and you should choose.
right?
I got it and then I still ended up getting COVID several times and giving it to other people.
Right. Arguably, though, it would have been a much harder um, time when you were sick if you wouldn't have got it, though. Um, I don't think the shot wasn't really ever meant to make sure you didn't get it, but it was meant to lessen the severity of it if you did. You're probably thinking to yourself over there, Kaylee, still pretty darn severe.
My mom still ended up getting it and she was just as sick as I was every time that I had it. So, I mean, I don't really see, any difference.
Yeah, and every time I got it like 4 or 5 times, and every time I got it, it got a lot worse.
Yeah, I think I got the first two shots myself. I never got any of those boosters after, but I think I ended up having it 2 or 3 times myself. I think every time I got sicker each time. I think I'm right there with you all.
I got it because I worked with the public. Like I was deemed essential in what I would argue is a very non-essential job, and worked through it, and it felt like the right thing to do for me at the time. And I've had 2 boosters, but honestly, once I got to my 3rd booster, it made me feel as sick as having COVID and knocked me out for a couple of days. So do with that what you will. My immune system is just personally garbage. I, I am a chronically ill person and was a 5-time COVID loser. I got it 5 times that I know of, but I did notice that after I got my first shot kind of late because that was when you had to wait to get it. Um, and I'd already had it twice before I could get my vaccine. And the 3rd time was noticeably better for me personally. The 2nd time I thought I was going to die. I felt like someone was sitting on my chest, but the 3rd time was noticeably better. So
Yeah, I guess the idea was herd immunity, right? Like if everybody gets the jab, then it will help even the people who don't get the jab. The immunity of the greater number will kind of spread over even into the group who doesn't. So if you have one person who it's the same argument for masks. Masks was something else that caused an uproar a few years ago, right? Like if everybody's wearing a mask, a greater number of people, hopefully the contagion won't spread. You have some people who aren't wearing masks. Um, there's a higher chance of spreading that contagion. Of course, whether or not that was true or not, it's a different question. Um, I don't even know if that was ever properly studied. But the common sense test would suggest perhaps that if everybody was wearing them, that it would be less of a risk of catching it. But I don't know if that's true. Common sense is scientific in this case or not. Same argument there. Right? People, the utilitarians were wearing the masks. People more probably centered on individual liberties and stuff were not wearing. Who's to say who's right here? Um, Utilitarians would argue they're right, I think, because the risk of the pain you would have of not wearing it is less than the pain of somebody getting the contagion. So that's kind of how Bentham would weigh in his pleasure pain calculus. Yeah, it reminds me of Jim Justice a few years ago. Remember Jim? He's you remember his little outburst? Follow the fucking guidelines, right? Our senator, our senator now. I'll say no more. I'll say no more.
My brother still calls him the Bob Evans guy
Yeah.
because the day before the federal shutdown was when he said, if you want to go to Bob Evans, go to Bob Evans. And then the next day they were like, hey, this is getting really bad, actually, guys. Probably don't go anywhere. Poorly timed speech, I think.
Yeah, I still say that every time I pass a Bob Evans. I say, if you want to go to Bob Evans, go to Bob Evans. Well, we went from the great Robert C. Byrd to that.
Some of his quotes really hit, though. He also once said, instead of counting cows, you're counting legs and dividing by 4. And I say that more often than I'm really proud of.
He's always good for some laughs. He and Baby Dog.
He comes through the drive-through where I work all the time, and he always has the dog. He always has the dog. He's let us pet her before.
That's funny. Yeah, these utilitarianism is something that will affect you guys a lot in your own practice. Like, so that's something, especially if you're going into the medical field, right? These are questions that people like medical boards at hospitals try to weigh. Um, yeah, if you ask me, I'm not much of a utilitarian. Right? I see things more just. I think you guys have gathered to the course. I see things more from like a natural law point of view. Right? Some things are inherently right. Some things are inherently wrong. Um, so I tend to see things more from that perspective. And that all that stuff can get really complicated, as we will see next week when I present to you some scenarios. Now this way of thinking, think about it. It's really cold. It's very cold. It's logical, but it is kind of cold if you think about it. Thinking about should we base decisions on things like this? Even if you want to think about this recent shutdown of the government, the Democrats folded yesterday and didn't didn't get what they were negotiating for in the whole term, which was uh, keeping that subsidy on health care. So everybody's health care is getting ready to go up sky high. But why did they fold? Um, Probably if you want to think about that from a utilitarian point of view, right? Think about all the people who were being affected out of work, people who weren't getting food stamp subsidies. Like that's probably part of why they folded. But the pain that will come from raising your insurance is less than the pain that will come from this shutdown continuing. So yeah, that's if you want to look at it from a utilitarian perspective, that's probably why they did it. Um, but this again, this way of thinking dominated the 19th century. Like this philosophy, um, Charles Dickens wrote about this in his novel Hard Times. You guys have ever heard of that book? but he kind of critiques this way of thinking in that book. This way of thinking can apply to all kinds of things, like even thinking about, like maybe thinking about even something like a college. Like what programs should a college offer? This is something that I had last Thursday. I had to go in front of the school's board of governors and talk about the utility, so to speak, of stuff like we do. And well, oftentimes, if you think about even things like education from more of a utilitarian perspective, let's teach the things that will cause the most jobs, for instance. Right? Well, think about something like arts degree or a humanities degree. Sure, you can get jobs with it, but something like a business degree or a medical degree of some sort's probably an easier ticket. If you see something like, if you see something even like education from a utilitarian point of view, uh, prioritize those things that will cause the most harmony. People leaving their degree program with a nice job in hand. You look at education from a different perspective, um, the end goal of it arguably isn't to get a job, right? It's to become more well-rounded. So again, depends on how you look at the purpose of education, if I want to use that as an example. When I went in front of the board, I pretty much told them, hey, this myth that getting a humanities degree doesn't get you a job, it's a myth. I told them about how our graduates have gone on to get full scholarships to law school. Our graduates are doing things like community work in the local community. They're doing important work. So
Are they trying to cut it?
it's always close to the chopping block. Yeah, always is. Right. The main reason why that our program doesn't have that many people. Uh, we have the English concentration and the public relations concentration. Main reason why our program doesn't get cut is because we're all here anyway, teaching basic freshman English and world literature and stuff like that. So we're here anyway, so offering that program isn't costing the school much money. The English concentration is very low. It's only like 5 or 6 people at the moment. The public relations concentration's got like 20 or 30 people in it, I think. So, but even think to yourself, why does that concentration have more people? Well, arguably, it's more marketable as an instant ticket for a job. Again, that's not true. Actually, English degrees are in very high demand nationwide right now. A lot of these big corporations and stuff are finding that whenever they're hiring people like business majors can't think their way out of a paper box, right? So a lot of the companies are looking for liberal arts majors now because they have more critical thinking skills. So take that for what you will, but these are arguments that we're discussing in education all the time. WVU just suffered through that last year. I don't know if you guys paid attention to what's going on up there. But last year they cut, I don't know how many programs. And their excuse was they're costing the school money. No, when in reality, maybe it does, but the bigger money drain is the administrators who are making 6-figure salaries. Right? A school that has more administrators than faculty, which is most schools anymore, That seems like kind of a problem. So our school, WVU, the state of West Virginia, you can actually not even get a doctorate degree in math now. You have to go out of the state to get a doctorate degree in math. Whether you like math or not, math's pretty important. But they thought that was worth chopping. So
The school we just worked at in New Mexico has a student population similar to Bluefield State, and they have 5 VPs, and they don't know why their budget is so unbalanced.
yeah, well, we got 4 or 5 ourselves here at Bluefield State, 13 or 1400 students. That's how many we have. So look it up. Yeah, they between vice presidents and deans and assistant deans and assistant to the assistants and everything else that a lot of these bigger schools have, it's getting out of control. That's why your tuition's not going up. It's not because the programs are costing a ton of money. It's because of that. You know, they also cut foreign language. So they used to have almost every kind of foreign language you could think of up there. Now they're just offering Spanish. So not to detract from Spanish, but it seems like you're cutting something pretty important there. So hopefully this lecture kind of illustrated how utilitarianism extends over our society and the way we think. I think more of us are utilitarians than not. And anytime you do something like a cost benefit analysis, that's something that's popular in business, cost benefit analysis. Like, what's the cost of having this program or something versus the benefits that it will offer? Even conducting such an analysis is a utilitarian exercise. Okay. So this is one way to think. Lots of people have problems with this, and that will be how we will kind of move on to closing out our units. So I'll just look. Yeah, so on Wednesday we're going to finish out the year talking about moral ethics. We will talk about the philosophy of a guy named Nietzsche. We're also going to talk about let's see, just drew I just went blank. Um, Existentialists. Yeah, we're going to talk about existentialists on Wednesday as well, and that will close out our large investigation on the history of ethics from the ancient to close to the present. And then again, the next 2 weeks after that, wrapping up the course, we will apply that, especially all the stuff we've learned, especially to medical ethics. So I'll see you all on Wednesday.